Let me tell you how I make more than $1 million a year from podcasting. Actually, 1.5 million to 2 million. And you know what? This 2 million, this is just the beginning. I can actually make more than 2 million from podcasting. So in terms of monetization, the first thing I really focus on is podcast subscriptions. Why? Because here you have an element of stability. You have recurring revenue. Subscriptions are going to make you financially comfortable. So what I do is I charge anywhere from $30 all the way to $69.99. So I have tier one, tier two, and tier three, with tier three being the most expensive pricing tiers. So every month, and the funny thing is I don't have a large following, but the thing is the 30 to 50 to 69.99. That's a sufficiently high enough subscription amount to actually guarantee me some recurring revenue. See, the whole thing is I'm not overcharging my listeners. You know, I'm bringing value, and I'm just charging what I think is reasonable for the value I'm bringing. Okay, I'm not going to say the niche I'm in, but I just want to say that when it comes to podcast subscriptions, what I do here is that I actually include a lot of stuff when it comes to subscriber only podcast content. For instance, I have bonus material and uncut interviews with guests. I have deep dives into specific topics that are either central to the podcast, to a podcast episode, or ancillary to that episode. Sometimes I have a Q&A or call-in show. I have mini courses tailored to my subscribers. Sometimes I throw in there, like last year, for instance, around Thanksgiving, I had exclusive offers, discounts, and brand deals. And sometimes I also have one-on-one coaching with subscribers. Now I do the one-on-one when I'm really relatively free because my schedule is really busy. Okay, but what I want to say here is that the podcast subscriptions accounts for about 25% of my revenue. So if you think about a million point five from podcasting, I mean, 250,000 to $350,000 is actually coming from podcast subscriptions. So that's really fantastic, and this is a recurring, stable revenue avenue. So how do I make more than 1 million, 1.2, 1.5 million dollars a year from podcasting? I also pay attention to listener support and donations. Okay, the thing is that not all listeners are, let's say, are financially or even financially able or even willing to subscribe to my podcast and be paying subscribers, right? Some listeners just want to support every now and then, not all the time, but every now and then. So listener support and donations have actually constituted about 5% of my revenue. Here I'm speaking about 50,000 to $75,000 a year. Okay, and the cool thing is that with listeners, they are really giving. Listeners know that you are doing you're busting your ass to bring value to them, and what better way for them to appreciate you? And the thing is that you can use, at least I use monetization platforms like Patreon, Coffee, and Buy Me a Coffee to add donation links across my marketing channels. So that's kind of cool. Now, one thing I want to say here is that with donation, don't push it. Do not push it. Do not really pressure your audience to actually give you money. No, a donation has to be something spontaneous. It has to be something natural. It has to be something voluntary, right? That's a donation. That like the whole definition of volunteering is in the donation word itself. So listener support, you want to ask, but don't push it. What I want to say here is that if you add value, listeners are very smart. People are generally kind. People are generally smart. People are generally very, how do I say it? They're mature enough to know that, hey, listen, this podcaster is doing his best or her best to add value to my life, and I'm going to pay it forward, so to speak. Okay, so let listeners know they can make a donation, including highlighting it in your podcast content. I do this all the time. I let my listeners know, listen, I'll appreciate some little donation. Or sometimes I add a donation link to my podcast newsletter. Even though the newsletter thing, I haven't seen much success from it. But hey, listen, I also include donation links in my social media bio, so that gives me a lot of traffic. So a lot of folks can see the donation link and really go back to the donation page, either on Patreon, Coffee, Buy Me a Coffee, or even PayPal, and they contribute. So last year, I've seen they've given about 50 to 75,000, which represents about 5% of my income. So that's fantastic. Another way I make money from podcasting, and I've seen a lot of success from it, even though it has been cyclical, it has been seasonal, it has had its ups and downs, is through automated ads. Okay, I've been actually getting automated ads on my podcast on my shows. Okay, and it's one of those things where I mean I work with a lot of networks. I work with a lot of let's say advertising platforms, and they're just putting ads on my shows. And the cool thing is that I've seen three types of podcast ads with with varying success. Okay, basically I've seen pre rolls, mid rolls, and post rolls. So depending on the episode, pre rolls can be more interesting. In other words, people are watching the pre roll depending on on the episode. Sometimes I've seen a mid roll being very successful. In other words, listeners are listening in all the way to the mid part of the show. That's really fantastic. That's really fantastic. So automated ads bring a lot of cash to my coffers, to my P&L. Okay. So last year, for instance, I've seen automated ads bringing about $150,000 all the way to what 200 to $225,000. So I'm actually equating this to about 15% of my revenue. So podcast subscriptions 25%, listener support and donations 5%, automated ads 15%. Okay, so that's really adding a lot of cash. And the cool thing I love about automated ads is that I don't have to really fight for it. All I have to do is just focus on producing a wonderful show, really focusing on my storytelling, my ability to connect with my audience, and the money is just rolling in because in the background you have those platforms that are really taking care of it, taking care of things. And when I say automated ads, I'm speaking about ads from YouTube all the way to Facebook, all the way to Spotify for podcasters, all the way to Custos, all the way to Apple Podcasts. So you do have some kind of, again, this is not, I wouldn't call this recurring revenue because advertising goes through ups and downs. So, but it's a solid, decent set of revenue streams. So the reason why I'm making more than $1 million a year from podcasting also has to do with sponsorships, and I love sponsorships, even though they require a lot of work, not only in terms of the creative process itself, but also the back and forth that you have to have with brains before you even before you sit down to record a show, and also afterwards, because brains have requirements. They want to check your stats. They want to check your analytics. They have a say in terms of the creative process. They want this. They don't like this. Remove this comma. Put this exclamation point. Whatever. Remove this image. Whatever. Okay. So it's one of those things. But the cool thing is, if you're able to charge more, if you're able to have a good relationship, which I have with stellar brains in my niche, you will make money. So I make about 20% of my revenue from sponsorships. So here, this is a pretty sizable income stream because you are looking at $200,000 all the way to a quarter of a million. So that's really good. Okay, and you are able to really get this if you are able to establish a relationship with brands, which I have done in the last 10 to 15 years, and that has helped me big time. See, the thing is, you don't really cultivate a relationship with a solid brand in 1 year. It doesn't happen, or in 6 months. Either they'll charge you, they'll give you a crappy fee or crappy bonus, whatever. But once you cultivate a relationship with them over time, they see the value you are bringing to their brand, and they also will reward you for it. That's what happens to me. Okay, the $250,000 that I'm talking about, $200 to $250,000. I didn't start making that overnight. It took time. Okay. So, but the cool thing is that I always pay attention. I'm always reaching out to new brands because you never know. Do not put all your eggs in the proverbial baskets. You want to diversify your revenue avenues. So what I do is I always pitch sponsorship deals to brands. I always put the title of my podcast logo or cover photo. Okay, I put a summary of my podcast, including my podcast topics, content, format, average episode length, popular guests, and more, because they need to see traction too. I put also a profile of my team, including a photo and bio about me and my podcast host, my experience, expertise, and any relevant qualifications. My listener profile, including key demographics, I call it key psychographics, core statistics such as listener numbers, downloads, and any other stats that I have that will actually help sell my podcast. I do this all the time. I put also some details on how I market my podcast. Okay. I do a lot of email. I do a lot of social media. I do a lot of, let's say, community announcements because I have a strong community. Also, I speak about proposed sponsorship rates and partnership ideas, links to to my top podcast episodes, and also my contact information. So this accounts for about 20% of my revenue. Another way I make money from podcasting, and I made last year close to fifty to $75,000, is actually through memberships. Okay, so because my rationale was very simple. If people are listening to my podcast, chances are they'll be interested to hear more from me, right? So please don't actually confuse memberships from subscriptions. Those are two different things, okay? So memberships actually have been my top strategy to build closer connections with my podcast audience and monetize my following. Again, I don't have a huge following, but I have a decent following, and that following, I can really monetize it. The cool thing is that memberships have allowed me to build a community around my podcast brand while generating monthly revenue from my listeners. So fans pay a monthly fee to access to my membership site, and in return, they get extra contact with me, bonus resources, and the chance to connect with other members. By the way, do not actually confuse subscription and memberships. I said this before, but I want to reiterate it because it can be confusing. So, what I love about membership revenue is that basically creating a membership product for my podcast has come with a host of benefits, and those benefits have been around since for the last 5 to 6 years. Actually, I started doing it around COVID, and ever since I've kept it. Okay. But the cool thing is that the benefits I've seen included predictable, recurrent monthly income, opportunities to cross-sell and upsell to members, a source for gathering feedback from listeners, the chance to build a strong sense of community and belonging around my brand, increased brand loyalty, and also having more brand advocates. So that's really a long list of benefits. But hey, listen, it has worked for me big time. Okay, and it's one of those things where I want you to really see the scalability aspect of the process. And one thing I've seen is that memberships are relatively low efforts for me to create and maintain. But the cool thing is they offer higher value to my audience. That's why I've been doing it for the last 5 years. Okay, and I've seen also that memberships have been a unique source of feedback and ideas for my podcast. So that's really good. And for membership, I actually use a site called Thinkific. Thinkific, okay. That's a site that has allowed me to build a community, to set up pricing tiers, and start engaging my audience from day one. So that's really fantastic, and their pricing is decent too. So the thing is that I just finished explaining to you a few ways for me to make money that I've made money from podcasting. But all the I want to give you a quick bonus. All those three below accounts for a total of 30%. So I've seen merchandising, digital products, and brand collaborations and partnerships. And brand collaborations and partnerships are different from sponsorships, by the way. Okay. So when I speak about merchandising, I actually give my listeners the chance to show off my podcast brand IRL with merchandise. I've seen that merchandising has been a great and fun way to monetize my podcast and turn my fans into brand advocates. And that's what I wanted to do from day one. Okay. And my podcast merch can include, it really depends on the season. Okay. But I've actually included every now and then hoodies, mugs, stickers. Okay. And I've gotten also creative and found new ideas from merchandising that's actually relevant to my target audience. So so this is kind of cool. And I've tried also involving my podcast audience in the process and asking them what they would most like to buy from me. So that's kind of cool in in terms of flexibility. Okay, and there are a lot of print on demand platforms. Okay, so you have Printful, Printify, Gelato, Guten. You also have I've also tried digital products. So digital products actually it's a great way to actually have extra income in terms of online courses, workbooks, templates, master classes, calendars, and checklists. So that's really fantastic. And the cool thing is that digital products have given me the chance to convert listeners into customers while offering my audience genuinely valuable information. So that's kind of cool. And I've also done brand collaborations and partnerships a lot. So basically, as well as finding sponsorships for my podcast, I can also use brand collaborations to monetize my content, which I've done, by the way. And the cool thing is that you'll be really surprised as how opportunistic this process can be. There are a wide range of different types of brand collaborations and partnerships I've been able to choose from. Okay, depending on the size of my podcast audience, because this size also fluctuates, and also it depends on what I'm offering to my listeners. So that's kind of cool. And what I've seen, for instance, is that I've gotten paid by brands to review a specific product or create informative content teaching my listeners how to do something using specific branded tools, platforms, and products. Okay, and that has really helped me and my audience big time. So that's really cool. Also, basically, when you think about brand collaborations and partnerships, you have a great way to promote your podcast and get more listeners to your channel, as well as helping you promote your paid products and services. And that's what I've done for the last 10 years. So those are the 8 ways that I was able to generate 1.5 million dollars a year from podcasting. And again, like I said, this is just the beginning because I see the sky is the limit, really. Let me give you a few tricks to really help you also get to the same level of income. What you want to do here is that you want to really repurpose your podcast content. So for every podcast episode you create, you should have a clear content plan to make sure every episode has maximum impact. So think about how you will use your podcast content across your business and different ways to repurpose your content, right? For example, one podcast can be repurposed into a blog post, a webinar, LinkedIn posts and carousels, Instagram reels, TikTok videos, YouTube videos and shorts, and Pinterest tips. So you have to really think about those processes in a holistic manner. You also want to include user generated content. So get your listeners more invested in your podcast by adding user generated content. Spice up your podcast by hearing from your audience through questions, calls, and even guest posts. And the cool thing is that user generated content helps your listeners to feel more connected to you and your brand, making it easier for you to build a community. It also makes it easier to encourage listeners to subscribe, sign up for a membership, or simply make a donation. So that's kind of cool. So you want, for instance, to invite listener questions and calls, host Q&A episodes, share listener stories, add case studies, include testimonials and reviews, invite listeners on your podcast as guests, agree to be interviewed by a fan, ask listeners what to talk about next, and run challenges and contests. And also, you want to do more public speaking, workshops, and discussions. That's going to help you big time. So, if you want to generate a buzz around your podcast and start generating more income from every episode, you want to put your expertise out in the world as much as possible. That means what? That means that not just appearing on your own podcast, but also making a name for yourself, such as let's say being a podcast guest, a guest speaker, a member on panel discussions, and more. So public speaking workshops and discussions all have the three ingredients for a wonderful function. They try to establish you as an expert in your industry and also an authority, okay, in your niche. By building your personal brand, you can become a thought leader who people can really trust this year. So, what's the takeaway here? In terms of making money from podcasting, I spoke to you about monetization strategies, okay? The bonus, the tricks, and now the takeaway. Thank you so much. God bless you. I will see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.